Welcome to this episode of Washington Policy on the Go. My name is David Bose. I'm the Communications and Marketing Director for Washington Policy Center. And during the legislative session, we're here every week speaking with our Senate directors about their latest research, what's been happening in Olympia. We talk about new research, new proposals, and analysis of those proposals to give you the information that you need to act on that and to share with friends to make sure that people are aware of what's happening and what they can do about it. We've got two special guests today. One is our Vice President for Research, Paul Guppy, who we'll speak with in just a moment. He'll be talking about a bill that would mandate that you vote and and all that entails. And then we'll speak with our Center for Education Director Liv Finne about a publication that was released today by her, 5 charts on spending in our public schools. The Superintendent of Public Instruction has described our school spending as in decline, and so we'll take a look at what school spending really is and a couple of different categories, and you'll be able to make your own assessment there. But first, let's turn to our Vice President for Research, Paul Guppy, who is with us. Paul, I know you did some quick analysis of a bill that was kind of surprising, a bill that would require us to vote, not just encourage, but mandate by law that we would all be obliged to vote. Why don't you describe that bill and what it would do for us?
Sure. So the bill is SB 5209. It has been introduced by Senator Hunt and Senator Billig, who himself is the leader in the Senate, and 12 other Democrats. So this bill is partisan in the sense that only Democrats have signed up on this bill. No Republicans have. And the key, well, I have the bill right here with my notes on it, but the key part of the text is the phrase, every ballot that's sent out in an election would include the instruction on it, you are required by law to submit this ballot. So what that does is make voting mandatory in Washington state. There are some practical things, and I can answer details later on if you like, but it's like, well, what is the penalty, and how do they administer it? And the answer is it's sort of on the honor system that there is no penalty, and it's entirely based on whatever you assert. So the bill is very mild, which again, as an analyst, indicates to us that there's something dishonest going on here. When a lawmaker proposes a bill and the bill doesn't have any enforcement, you have to ask yourself, why are they so shy about enforcing this rule if they think that mandatory voting is a good idea? So that's the first indicator. The second one is just the obvious reaction that people have, which is if you have a civil right, what's included in that right is the right to not exercise it. So you have the right to speak. You also have the right to not speak. You have the right to practice religion or practice your faith. You also have the right to have no faith or no religion. The government can't require you one way or the other. My favorite example I like to pitch to our Democrat friends is you have a Second Amendment right to own a firearm, but you are not required by the government to own a firearm. They would be horrified by that idea, rightly so. And the same applies to voting as well. A lot of people just find the very idea of it undemocratic and offensive.
If let's say this was implemented, as you point out, even though it's mandated, there's no teeth to it, so you don't get punished for not voting. But that's also a starting point,
Sure.
Right?
Sure. So the practical effects is obviously, you get people used to the idea of voting is mandatory, but you can sort of dodge it because there's no penalty. Okay. And then later, once we all agree that voting should be mandatory, they start adding penalties to it. So this is the case in other countries, and the supporters of this are quick to point out that something like 20 democracies around the world, like Australia, for example, have mandatory voting. And if you don't vote, there's some kind of fee that you have to pay. There's a penalty. I am quick to point out that countries like North Korea and the former Soviet Union and all the Eastern Bloc communist countries during the Cold War had mandatory voting as well, even though the voting didn't mean anything under those authoritarian governments. So the principle that some countries have mandatory voting doesn't really tell you anything, because authoritative countries have the same thing. But in the United States, we have a principle that, as I said, if you have a civil right, you have the right to not do that. So the fact that there's no penalty in it, to me, that's the dodgy part, is that it's like they're trying to pull a fast one. It's dishonest to tell people this is essential to our democracy, which is what supporters say, but they're not courageous enough to back that up with any kind of a consequences if you don't do it. So that's why I think of this proposal as being something of a scam. It's an effort to try to pull one over on people, get you used to the idea of mandatory voting, and then maybe impose a penalty later on.
I was thinking about what you're describing here, the right not to say something as well, as part of our freedom of speech, and the right not to vote would be a part of that, to avoid the compulsion of speech. And I think they'd be on shaky Supreme Court ground on that score. But just thinking about some of the implications there on what that vote or what this mandatory voting could look like. It's also a robbery of basic information, because when people don't vote, they're also sending a message perhaps to candidates and to others that they're not excited about you. If you've got low voter turnout and low voter excitement, it shows that you're vulnerable, and it sends a message to party officials, or at least it should, that hey, their candidates are not exciting people. So there is information in low turnout as well. It's not like I'm trying to figure out why it would be like an achievement trophy, right? I mean, if you get everybody voting, but they're all mandated to vote, how is that a win? It's like, oh wow, I've got the most votes ever. Well, congratulations.
And that's why, my analysis, we posted my legislative memo on this bill, just a couple of pages, that goes into exactly this point, which is that the concept of mandatory voting undermines our democratic norms. And the reason is because it changes the relationship between the citizen and the government. In American democracy, and in all democracies, the idea is the government works for us, that the people elect representative and officials who then govern. If the lawmakers then turn around and impose a voting mandate on the citizens themselves, which people may ignore, as you're pointing out, it means that because participation in the election would no longer be voluntary, then voter turnout doesn't mean anything anymore, because people are not honestly casting their ballots based on what they think is best, or making the decision, even if it's out of just laziness, to not vote. That is your right. What that tells our elected leaders when voter participation goes down is an honest indicator in society that people have a problem with the government, and that they're not participating in the election. Instead of forcing people to cast a ballot, again, the more honest response from people in public office is to ask themselves, examine why are people not participating, and how can we encourage people to exercise their civic duty?
Question from Tom: would ballot harvesting be encouraged?
Well, not under this bill, okay, but separately under that's not today's topic, but in answer to this question, the system of all mail-in ballot that we have now, by its nature, and I think this is by design, is to encourage ballot harvesting and activists to go out and physically collect people's ballots, because the mail-in system means automatically that the government has mailed these out to every address in the state. And, so the ballots are out there, and that creates a system in which party activists have an incentive to go out and collect those ballots and bring them back.
Another question from an audience member: do sponsors believe this will bring out more partisan Democrat votes? As you pointed out, all the sponsors are from one party. If all the sponsors were for the minority party, this bill wouldn't be going anywhere, but all the sponsors are with the majority party, so it's anything's possible.
Yeah, so I'll report what they say. So in the bill itself, they have language that says, people have a universal civic duty to vote, and we give us a system where every vote counts, and people will be able to vote without obstruction or suppression. So their argument is that mandatory voting, I'm not sure I follow the logic of this, but their claim is that mandatory voting would reduce voter suppression and create what they call a universal civic duty to vote. So their claim is that the elections would be more fair and that there would be more participation. I guess the point about coercing people to vote would result in more ballots being cast. But as we noted before, I'm not sure what that would really tell us. it degrades the idea of voluntary participation.
So we've got a comment from Ron. I'll get your take on this, Paul. Even when we vote against Jay Inslee's agenda, it gets overturned anyway. This goes back as far as when Dino Rossi was elected twice and recounts continued until Gregoire was elected. I-976, same thing. After the people voted that legislation through, Governor Inslee got that overturned by putting it in front of his far-left Washington State Supreme Court. So the overall message here from Ron is that, voting doesn't matter. What's your take on that?
Yeah, exactly. So that's a question of whether elected officials respond to the will of the people. And that's where this bill produces an additional problem by changing that relationship, as I said, between the government and the system. By making voting mandatory, it just adds that kind of dishonesty where the voter is not really voluntarily responding. And it makes the problem that the questioner mentioned about these past events even worse, so that we can't really tell what the elections are telling us because people are being forced to vote. Maybe they don't want to. And regardless of how the election comes out, we have a problem where elected officials are not actually following what people want. The only solution to that is to have more voluntary participation in the election so people's will is expressed, and that we elect officials of either party who will actually respond to what people want in order to solve those problems about lack of trust that we've had in the past and that we have today, in fact.
Question from Carolyn. Do you think there could be abuse with the return of signed but blank ballots?
Yeah, so you're allowed to do that. All that this bill requires, it's very minimal, is you have to return the ballot. It doesn't say anything about filling it out. You're not required to even vote the ballot. All you have to do is take that little baby step and comply and send it in. But the thing is, that's the problem. So under communist systems, they made people vote. And if you didn't file your ballot, you heard about it. They did have penalties about it. Party members would come to your house and coerce you. Why didn't you fill out a ballot, comrade? And so people would file blank ballots. And again, the government was like, fine, you participated. So what dissidents under the Soviet system used to do is destroy their ballot. They would mark it up and I got muted by accident. So my point was that under authoritarian systems, they made you file in your ballot. They didn't care whether you filled it out or not. And this bill does the same thing. I was making the point that in communist countries, when people wanted to show resistance, they actually destroyed their ballot in order to show, I'm not going to comply with the mandate.
Right. And that's a great point. I mean, this is one of those things where you've got this intention, this idea that voting by itself is the ultimate good, but there are people who, if you have two candidates that you don't like, your way of speaking out on that might be to stay home, not vote, leave your ballot in the trash, whatever. I mean, it's up to you. I encourage people to vote, of course, but I'm big on the freedom, whether people, forcing people to do things, I'm much less inclined. Paul, thanks so much for the time. You can read Paul's analysis of this bill. It's one of our legislative memos. Legislative memos are what we published. He's holding it up right there. We publish those on our website at washingtonpolicy.org whenever we provide analysis on a bill or are requested to. So you can see that on our publications tab right there at washingtonpolicy.org. Let's turn now to Liv Finne. And again, thank you, Paul, for spending the time here. Liv, you had a publication.
Later, Dave.
All right, thanks, Paul. And you had a publication today released as well. This was a five charts showing how much public school spending and teacher pay have increased. Before we get to that, what I wanted to do, and I know it's not directly related to your publication. Well, I guess it is because we used your publication for it. But on January 9th, there was a press conference held by the superintendent of public instruction where he said that the state education spending was in decline. And he used a couple of different stats for that. And we put together a video that shows what he had to say about that and transposed it with some of your work. Donald, if you could play that for us, that would be great.
nation is investing more. We are now once again on the decline. This is unacceptable. Today, our state, as evidenced by this data, and something else we look at, how much of our state general fund, or what they call near general fund, are we investing in schools? It peaked at 51% of our state budget right after McCleary. The next biennium, it fell to 48%. Understandable. The legislature had discretionary funds. They'd maintained their constitutional commitment and felt there were other priorities. It's at the verge of slipping to 44%. We're almost back to pre-McCleary levels of investment.
All right, having a little bit of fun there, but the message of, hey, this has been in decline versus your analysis of the growth of funding, I thought it was worth doing a fact check there and asking people to vote on that. They can vote at washingtonpolicy.org for which perspective they find more accurate. And by the way, we have the unedited clip of Superintendent Reichdahl there as well, so you can see his full comments in the context which they were intended. But he says they're in decline. Your numbers indicate otherwise. Why don't you walk us through the charts that you picked to create and why?
Well, just to clarify, if you click on fact check on our website, you can go and vote, because there's a lot on our website. Yeah, this was one of 4 different misstatements of fact that the highest education official in our state made on his January 9th conference, press conference, making his annual update for the public schools. So I have been tracking school spending now for a long time. And for me, it's pretty easy to update these charts because I know exactly where the official records are. So I just started by looking at the teacher pay and benefit increases since 2015 to the present. The teachers are now receiving a benefit increase of 37% increase, so that the benefit and salary and benefit packages have increased significantly over the last 6-7 years. Then I made another chart, just raw numbers showing the annual budget from total revenue from all revenue sources, state, federal, and local revenue to the schools has grown from $9.8 billion in 2010 to $18.8 billion in 2022. That's a 91% increase. It's kind of astonishing to call this a decline. Then the next chart I did was a per student spending number, which has grown from $9,700 per student in 2010 to $18,200 per student in 2022. That is an increase of 85%. I think you calculated that in the chart, nearly double. And then I did a couple more charts, the student, the employment growth. Any business owner knows that the most of his, and in education this is true, that most of the cost in a business is for labor. And the school employment charts show that there's been a 20%, something like 21% increase in the number of employees hired by the schools in the last 10 years. And yet still only about half are classroom teachers. So that tells you that a lot of the hiring is going to purposes outside of classroom instruction. And then finally, I showed that the student enrollment is dropping, which everyone's been talking about, and 4% loss in enrollment in the last 3 years. 46,000 families have pulled their students out of the public schools. And this reflects, again, the loss of trust. I think there's a theme to this session. Just listening to Paul before, the democracy is the consent of the governed, right? We are supposedly governing ourselves through our elected representatives, and now we're seeing a real trend in reducing choices, more compulsions, less honesty from public officials who are supposed to be telling us the truth. That's why this is such a great exercise, a lot of fun to do. It happens every year. We can anticipate.
And for some, and for some of those charts, I think they become more important when compared to the other. That's why I like having them all together, because, for example, when you point out the increase in growth of public school employees, and then point out that, less than half of them are actually teachers, but also that enrollment's down 4%. So you have this growth in teachers, you have fewer students, you have much more being spent, and test results are not, the COVID era caused a lot of problems for the test results, but they weren't great before COVID either. There's problems there, so you can't just say, hey, it was the shutdown for everything. Shutdown caused a lot of learning loss, but there was problems with learning prior to that as well.
Yes, I mean, it actually underscores the fact that there is no connection between spending and learning, and that the monopoly system doesn't care about that, because it's all of its incentives are to drive more funding to their spending. So eventually people will understand that $18,000 per student is more than enough to educate children very well to a high quality. $18,000 per student, we're talking nearly $400,000 per classroom, and $120,000 per teacher. You can see a lot of the money is being diverted to other purposes that are not focused on educating children to minimum standards set by the state. And so you can just see this. The mission has, in the legislative session, this session, there are bills to give everyone a free lunch and breakfast, whether or not you need one. There are bills to further increase compensation and benefits to teachers. No bills to improve the quality of instruction, like removing some of the obstacles to getting rid of bad teachers in the classroom. No bills to, yet there's discussion about providing funding for individual tutoring to help kids catch up from pandemic learning loss. But that's just discussion. We don't know if it'll happen. The state superintendent of public instruction has declared that all the unspent federal COVID relief funds have already been allocated to spending on in the districts, and not necessarily to address pandemic learning loss. In fact, in that same press conference where he said that the numbers are declining, the funding is declining, he said that don't use the word pandemic learning loss. Our kids are accelerating in recovery. So it's nice to do this exercise. We really need to get off. Our lawmakers really need to examine this premise, which is proven false over and over and over again, that more funding will deliver better results in a public monopoly system. Clearly, the answer is providing more options to families, more choices, so they can actually select the school that their child attends, so that the actual schools have less regulatory oversight that is so, that does has such a harmful impact on the quality of instruction. Letting teachers teach, letting principals lead, everything we've been talking about for a long time. This is not rocket science. This is just plain common sense, and we don't see it being offered to us by our state superintendent Reichdahl, for one. He's not talking about helping kids learn. And there are other, in this right now, we have an emergency in education. We have pandemic learning loss. We're setting kids up for lower lifetime earnings. Our state has fallen in the rankings dramatically because of what happened during COVID. And I see every effort being made at the state level to not pay attention to it. Don't talk about it. Don't talk about it. We need more money. It's almost like COVID never happened in Olympia.
Yeah, the argument keeps going back to a paper you wrote some years back about kids in failing school districts, when the state used to self-identify, and they came up with a way of determining which schools were doing a good job and which schools were failing. And that was their words. And then they decided, well, failing hurts too many feelings, so let's change the name of that. And their entire focus was on the system instead of the students. So every year that a student was stuck in a school that was failing, if it continued to fail, regardless of whatever new, renovation and reform they were going to do, if the schools typically ended up, failing year after year, and the kids were stuck there. So year after year, one generation, one class after the next was left in the failing school until they just changed the name so that no schools are failing anymore. They're all like progressing or whatever the euphemism for failing was that they chose. But basically the kids got the short end of the stick there, and they're the ones that will suffer for a lifetime. and their children's children might be impacted by this decision because the parents couldn't get them out. They didn't have the resources to get them out. It's very difficult. And the focus was on preserving, that system rather than helping the customer, which, in every other place that we look, like, your phone company or anything else that you're choosing, roofing company, plumbing, another service industry, you go, or if you've got a lawyer, for example, that's not doing their job or it's not appealing to you, you can move on to somebody else very quickly. And so there's a motive to help you, to change or to crumble, right? But
Yes.
that's not here. So
Well, yes,
frustrating.
you said it so well, Dave. It's very true. Remember, Governor Inslee ran on the platform that he was going to grade every school on the A, B, C, D, F scale, remember? And he pulled back from that because the feelings were going to be hurt in the system, when
Right.
that would have been a very good accountability measure. And then the achievement index was turned into another, it's Orwellian, the language there. No one's being held to account in the public school system. And you often hear families complaining that no one's listening to me. My kid needs X, Y, and Z, and he's not getting what he needs. Okay, the system, and actually writ large, what's happening in Olympia at the state level happens all the time at the local level. Look what's happening. Look what happened in the Bellevue Public Schools. There's been a 9% drop in enrollment in Bellevue. Now that is a big number. And there was just a chart I have a chart here of the drop in enrollment in Seattle Public Schools. There are families who have decided these schools are no longer interested in teaching reading, math, and science and history. And we've got to educate our children ourselves somehow, some way. That is what's going on at the kitchen table in many places in Seattle and Bellevue and across Washington State. And so this is what no one's talking about in Olympia. And it reflects what a monopoly does. Why do they care? They have a guaranteed income stream, and they're going to give themselves extra funding to so-called stabilize their funding for the enrollment loss. So what we're doing is we're giving more money to a system that is educating fewer children. Any rational person can see that is headed in a bad direction. So that's why choice is such a powerful argument, why states are passing universal school choice bills now, and in legislatures.
There was a great piece of testimony at a bill that I was going to bring up with you anyway, because you have a publication, a legislative memo on that bill. It was the education savings account bill. There was a line delivered by one woman testifying there where she said that if the public school system is willing to fund the empty desks, in other words, the places where the kids are not anymore, they're still granting funding for the students as though they're there, even if the kids are not enrolled anymore. Surely they should be willing to fund the students who are where the students actually are, where they're actually going, fund the actual student, not just the empty chair. And I thought that was a powerful message that, when you're funding empty chairs, but refusing to fund the other students and pretending like it's some violation of church and state, when it's as common as the GI Bill to have money like this in a where the individuals make the choice of where to go. It's not government compelling them where to go.
Right.
This is not nearly as jaw-dropping and shocking as opponents would like.
Well, that's such a good point. And that woman was Jeannie Magdua from the Conservative Ladies of Washington. She did a great job making that point. But remember what just happened during COVID. The federal government poured out billions and billions of dollars to give individual people hurt by the closed society direct funding. If their jobs had been cut for some reason, if their businesses were in trouble, direct aid was given to people who were hurt by COVID, with the exception of the children who were hurt by COVID, who were in the K-12 schools. What does that tell you? There's a carve out. It's almost like the children have a target on their back. We're not going to protect their educations because they have their special interests are so powerful. They refuse to let the families have the direct funding to help their children catch up. So you don't think parents haven't learned this lesson? Nearly 2 years of having their education interrupted, mostly because the union refused to reopen the schools. They got the lesson. Everybody heard that. That is a legacy from from the COVID school shutdown. And parents are not going to forget that. They learned something very important there, and it will stay. And, now we're seeing all kinds of positive, this is so great about America. The Americans will take on responsibilities that have been taken away from them, like educating their children, and they'll educate their children themselves. I'm seeing all these exciting examples of micro schools, like in Arizona, where a couple parents get together, or, a few families put their kids in a little micro school. They hire a teacher, and they're across grades. This is like going back to the, one-room schoolhouse. And with the support of the state funding, the universal education savings account in Arizona is $7,000 per child, and you could get together a nice group of friends to educate your children, and you could avoid some of the harmful content that's in the schools now as well.
Yeah, I was thinking back. We at Washington Policy Center conducted a poll a couple of years ago and one of the questions was about school choice. I know people say, well, Washington Policy Center, they just, they're going to ask whoever favors it. No, it was a scientifically balanced poll of the demographics of the state, and support for school choice was up towards 72%, if I remember correctly. I mean, it was really high. There's an institutional resistance, but among people in general, they see this, and I think more and more as we're competitive with everything. Everything you buy is competitive. It's on Amazon, right. With your cell phone, whatever it is, there's competition. They're more comfortable with that idea now. And yet, as you point out, we have an ESA bill in the legislature right now. You took a look at it. I think it's limited in scope, but it's we're actually behind other states when it comes to that kind of reform, right?
Yes. Well, so just to reiterate your point about the poll results, it is at 72% across the board, and it jumped 10% from 62% to 72% after the COVID school shutdown. So that tells you what I was saying is reflected in the polling, that parents, Democrats, independents, Republicans, Black, Hispanic, brown, white, Asian, they all support school choice by majorities, strong majorities, at least strong majorities. And so that is what's driving the expansion of school choice opportunities across the nation. And I mean, it is amazing what's happening right now. Dave, I have to, okay, let's just review. Last year, West Virginia passed a universal ESA bill, which would give families in West Virginia access to about $4,500 per child to spend on a private school education or homeschooling, whatever. That was done in West Virginia. Soon after, last summer, in Arizona, the state there passed the universal ESA account, providing families $7,000 per student. Okay, then just a couple weeks ago, that's on January 24th, Iowa passed a universal education savings account. I don't remember the number there, but it was $7,000 or $8,000 per student. And then 4 days later, the state of Utah passed a universal savings account. So this is like growing, and there's another 6 states like Texas and Oklahoma. A bunch of other states are considering universal. Oh, Florida, which is a big state, is considering a universal school choice bill. This is momentous, So it was quite exciting to see this happen in other states, but then also to have a ESA bill, House Bill 1615, introduced in the Washington State Legislature, sponsored by Representative Carolyn Eslick from Sultan, and with a Democratic co-sponsor, Amy Whalen. And that bill would give, if it passes, the sum of $10,600 for any low-income child or child assigned to a failing school in an ESA, so their parents can send them to private school. And if you're a special needs child, you get the $10,600 plus another $10,000, $20,600, now nearly $21,000 if your child is a special needs child to educate your child. So exciting. The bill got a hearing, and we'll see if it moves. But now the discussion is out there in the Washington State Legislature. And I find that a great leap forward, because in the past, a bill like that would not have even been given a hearing. So you see the pressure from these other states is applying pressure to our legislators here.
Question from Patrick. How do you think choice would be different between metropolitan locations like Everett and more rural locations like Kittitas?
Well, it would, that's a great question. Thank you for that. In Everett, you would probably have established private schools that would benefit from additional customers that would have the wherewithal to attend their private schools through a school choice bill. But in more rural places, I think you would see, like you're seeing in Arizona, the formation of these micro schools by parents just getting together and forming their own schools, and because they would then have the resources and the wherewithal to do that. So that's what I think would happen. But you would also see a growth of established private schools opening, because they would have a customer base that had the funds to pay private school tuition all of a sudden, you see.
Yeah, it's funny. A lot of times people think that kids wouldn't get the full services that they might get at the larger school. But, I used to teach when Kirby Wilbur left. I took over his job teaching private school students at a homeschool co-op for a couple of years. And I was just amazed at all the programs they had for the kids there. I mean, it was just chock full of people who they brought in from the outside, teaching things like robotics or you name it. There was a class there for it. And they had more variation of opportunity than I did, in my school growing up. So I was really impressed with that.
Well, I think it's so exciting, because imagine what you could put in front of young children and youth, which you can't do today. There are so many talented people in our society that don't hold a teaching credential, but have a experience and knowledge in a field that is fascinating to kids, particularly in high school. And there are people who are retired who would love to be in the classroom once in a while explaining their experience in life. Wouldn't that enrich a high schooler's experience?
Yeah. Next question from Charlie. What do you make of Chris Reichdahl's statement on vouchers for religious schools regarding the GOP and Fox News? I'm not sure.
I know.
I didn't see it on Fox, but I can imagine what it was.
Well, the tweet was really odd. He was acting like there's this threat at the door and horrible people are trying to give families school choice. It was so strange to attack. He is the state superintendent of public instruction. He's not supposed to attack the GOP. I mean, it's just weird. And it just actually is acting so frightened by the concept of giving a few families access to the money. And that's obviously the fear here. They think that I think it reflects his anxiety about the power of the idea, because all you have to do is start talking about, let's fund the student, not the system. And that clarifies that we've been funding the system, the underperforming system, and the buildings and the mortar and bricks, and all this other content that is not central to the mission of the schools. And so that, here we have a system that's easily twisted and manipulated for personal gain, and as opposed to funding the child, funding the student. Now, isn't that a wonderful concept? Oh, let the dollars follow the child. It's sort of the student backpacking idea. And that is so powerful, especially as all the analysts of public education spending show that the money is often diverted. It's intended to help the learning, these kids that are struggling in learning, but it never gets to that program, right?
It's one of those things too. If they think, what's going to happen with this if these kids leave? There's all this danger. I think I go back to, we've left kids in failing schools through their entire high school career, and odds were they never graduated because it was so bad. And we know what the consequences are for those kids, and they're not good. I mean, it is all bad news. And we spent a lot of money in the system trying to keep them in the system, instead of asking, how can we serve these people best right now? How can we get each child the help that they need right now? Because childhood, you don't get a redo. You can't press pause and then start it later. That they gotta do it.
And the whole idea is so awesome, because we're talking about, it's not just school choice. There was a very smart writer, I think it was the Manhattan Institute, who put out an article recently and said this is about giving parents power. It's parent empowerment. It's parent choice. It's letting parents have the power to choose the school their child attends. And who knows the child the best? It's certainly not some official sitting in the Seattle Public Schools. It's obviously the parents know the child the best. They have their best long-term interests at heart. Certainly in the public schools, they don't care. They just want the money to come and let's move them through the system. That's been clear that's their motivation is to get the kids in the system so they can get the money, and that's sufficient for them.
Yeah.
Parents have a much more noble set of hopes and dreams for their kids than some public official who's not telling the truth about school funding. So that idea. Okay, so long parents have been frustrated because they don't have control, or they've been made passive because they don't have control. That's the downside. Parents don't go to meetings at school, at the schools, because they complain. They say this is bad. Stop doing this to my kid, and nobody listens. So you give power, you give the parents control over the funding, and all of a sudden you'll find them listening. I mean, so I think there's just so many benefits to the idea that it's definitely going to catch on. It's moving, across the country. There was a wonderful article in the Wall Street Journal this weekend by Jeb Bush describing what's happening in Florida with school choice. He started his whole movement when he was in governor of Florida. He started with let's grade the schools A, B, C, D, F. That was what his first reform, and then he put in all kinds of choices for kids that were assigned to failing schools. So that is the model that respected the needs of the child to get educated. I mean, why has this become so distorted and corrupted, really, by self-interest?
Well, you brought up the fact that the superintendent brought up the GOP in his comments, and I just wanted to point out, one, it's kind of a classic move on the part of the executive branch in the state, because they hold up the boogeyman, but there's been one party dominance in the executive branch, almost complete, not quite, but almost. And significantly so that there's for 40 years it's been one party rule there. So when the other side is brought up, it's like, well, usually there's kind of a he said, she said. People like those kinds of stories, especially in politics. It's Democrats versus Republicans or whatever. But in this case, there's pretty much one player on the block that usually, and then there's been a couple of exceptions to that rule, but the overwhelming amount of plays and decisions and policies have been set in stone by one side, and so it's and then when you see that poll number that you referred to, 72%, Washington, if you get 70% support in Washington, 72%, that by the virtue of math, the nature of mathematics, there's just no way that could be a partisan a bill. I mean, that would
Right.
be, you have to include Democrats and independents and Republicans to
Right.
get to a 72% threshold. So the idea that this is some kind of school choice is some kind of partisan hack approach, it doesn't fit the poll numbers, it doesn't fit the reality elsewhere, and maybe that's scary to people who are desperate for the status quo, but it's certainly it pokes holes very quickly in this idea that this is all a partisan debate.
Well, they're just experts at saying, no, we can't do that. We can't do this. We can't do that. It's almost, even though it's so interesting to listen to these presentations by Reichdahl, because he used the word innovation at least 20 times, because he knows that there is no innovation in the public system, so because the idea of choice is in a monopoly system is an innovation that makes sense, will improve the quality. All the research is showing this. There have been all kinds of empirical studies showing that if you introduce enough school choice in a particular district to that people actually can leave with their dollars, the children remaining in the schools that are that have not left, they benefit because the system will improve itself from within. This is what's being shown. That's if you care about academic learning, which I do, certainly. I think choice will help improve academic learning and drive more excellence in the system of public education, whether it's publicly funded and publicly delivered, or whether it is publicly funded and privately delivered. There's no reason why we can't have a publicly funded, privately delivered education system if that's going to give better results to children. And so this whole idea of they sound like people who don't want to let airplanes take off in the sky. Okay. We can't change the way we do things. We've always done it like this for 120 years. We just need more money and we'll be successful. And that is just not true. So, what we have here is a revolutionary reform, and it's taking hold in other states. And, other people hear about it, even if they're being denied it here in Washington state. They hear it's happening to their cousins and aunts and uncles and others living in other states. Oh, you know what I saw today? Jason showed me this on Twitter. In Massachusetts, the union has introduced a bill to make school strikes legal. Okay, they are illegal in Massachusetts, as they are in Washington state. Yet the union has gotten so powerful that they're trying to make them legal. And the governor there, whose name escapes me, but a woman, has said, no, that's not okay. The children deserve to get an education. I think, wow, I don't know what party she's in, but there's this pushback against the union closing the schools, saying they need more money because everyone is recognizing who was hurt during COVID. And it's the children who have not been given the individual tutoring they need to catch up, that are right now need that tutoring. And the leaders of Washington state don't appear to be addressing that. They're trying to pretend that it doesn't happen, that it's not there, when it's very real.
Let's turn now to some audience questions. Another data point that might be interesting is money spent over per pupil percentile and exam results over time.
Yeah.
Interesting idea anyway.
Yeah. Good idea.
Another question, great chart would be one line of money spent per student and another line of the average test results to show lack of correlation. Do you have this online somewhere, perhaps?
Yeah. Yes, I've done it in the past. I didn't do it this time, but the test results have plummeted. Last year there was 70% of the students did not pass the state test in math. Now it's at 62% didn't pass the test in math. So the numbers, the chart is like this for funding, and the results for test scores are declining. That's everything you need to know.
Next question from Deborah, will the WEA, Washington Education Association, who is a major donor for Democrats, be willing or be telling the Democrat legislators to vote no on any bill that will take away money from public schools? It is obvious they want funding for the schools and not the children. Yes,
that's what they will be telling them for sure. I spoke up about that the union opposes giving parents freedom of choice in the education of their children. And I was cascaded by the House Education Chair, Sharon Tomiko Santos, for supposedly impugning people's motives. And I was just observing, I wasn't impugning anybody's motives. I was just observing the fact of the matter, that the union is a powerful obstacle to change in Washington state.
Next question, with the new laws put into place that allow immigrants the same benefits as citizens in Washington state, my concern is that this will be a money laundering situation or not going to Washingtonians. Is there a provision in place to make sure these funds go to citizens?
That's a good question. We haven't gotten that far. I don't really have an answer for that. The one control that I've seen in the bill, in this education savings account bill, is that it would be put into a bank account that is subject to audit by the treasurer, the state treasurer, to make sure that the funds are spent on education. So that seems to me be a reasonable oversight mechanism, but I haven't seen anything regarding the immigrant status of the people receiving these funds. So I don't have an answer for you.
Well, Liv, thanks so much for making the time today. Good publication. If anybody wants to see it, we've got the link right there in the chat. Those are the 5 charts, easy to share. We've got a couple of social media shareables, and don't forget to vote on our fact check page and urge your friends and others to do so. Let them watch all the videos that we posted there of Superintendent Reichdahl's speech, as well as our own charts and graphs from Liv Finne, and make that vote happen. Thanks again, Liv.
Thank you.
You bet. Now, before we close the show, I did want to point out that our Center for Transportation Director, the Cole Center for Transportation Director, Charles Prestude, has a new analysis of a bill that would have a union representative appointed on transit governing boards, supposedly to ensure union representation, but since these transit agencies are heavily unionized anyway, and the unions are, a lot of the representatives there are typically people that were heavily favored by the unions and had financing from the unions to get elected. They're on that panel. They're on both sides of the situation already anyway, but that bill and its analysis are up on our website at washingtonpolicy.org. And we'll ironically, by the way, the same day that his posts are coming out, I saw that Sound Transit was having trouble keeping some escalators working. So, and remember, they're relatively new escalators. Sound Transit's platforms aren't that old. It's not like these are, 40, 50, 60, 70 years old. These are new. and people are being stranded without stairs or without escalators or elevators in some other deeper places. So not pleasant. And you'd think there'd be a greater focus on that. Maybe even hiring some, say, technicians on that score. So you can watch for that. Also, some of you have been asking about Dory Monson's memorial service. A lot of people have emailed about that, and there was a private service, but there was about 300 people there because it was expanded to some friends and colleagues and people he had coached. And the man was a very busy and very active person. I mean, he lived his life, and I mean LIVE in all caps. And so I did ask if that was going to be available on video, and if so, we can share it, and we'll share it with you. Dory, for those of you who don't know, is a great, he was the #1 local talk show host at one point. He was #1 local in the nation, not just in Seattle, but he had the largest market share, and he received some distinguished awards for having the most popular show in the nation. He was really an outstanding host, and he was famed for challenging the status quo in government, listening to whistleblowers and taking their information on and challenging elected officials and bureaucrats with that information. And he passed away at the age of 61. There is I did write up a summary of his memorial service, which you can see on our blog at mynorthwest.com. It's called The Last Dory Monson Show. You can see that. And then as we get more information or other things available, we'll make sure that we share that with you as well. But he was an irreplaceable person, and he was excellent at encouraging accountability. Thanks again for joining us. We'll see you next Tuesday with more of Washington Policy Center on the Go. Thank you.